President al-Assad affirms Syria's commitment to cooperate with any honest effort to resolve the crisis on condition that these efforts are neutral and independent. Pope Benedict XVI calls for halting sending weapons to Syria. And the Syrian Arab armed forces continue qualitative operations in Aleppo and its countryside, inflicting heavy losses on the mercenary terrorists. Good afternoon, this is news in English from the Syrian Arab television in Damascus. President Bashar al-Assad received this morning the UN envoy to Syria, al-Ibrahimi, and the accompanying delegation. The latest developments in Syria were reviewed during the meeting. President Assad affirmed Syria's complete commitment to cooperate with any honest effort to resolve the crisis on condition that these efforts are neutral and independent. His Excellency clarified that the real problem in Syria lies in confusing the political axis with what's going on the ground, considering that work on the political axis is continuous, especially with regard to Syria's call for conducting a national dialogue based on the wills of all Syrian people. The President added that the success of the political action is linked to putting pressure on the states that offer funding to terrorists, train them, and smuggle weapons into Syria to halt such acts. In turn, al-Ibrahimi affirmed that the basis of his work is the interests of the Syrian people and their aspirations, pointing out that he would work independently and his terms of reference would be Annan's Plan and Geneva Declaration. He added that the agreement of all parties is required to add or amend any point. Al-Ibrahimi stressed the necessity of unifying all parties' efforts to find a solution for the crisis due to Syria's strategic importance, its demographic diversity, and the impact of the crisis on the region as a whole. Concluding his statement, Al-Ibrahimi affirmed that the solution cannot be realized except through the Syrian people themselves. And in a press conference, al-Ibrahimi stresses that President al-Assad and the Syrian government will support him in carrying out his mission in the best way possible. He added that they will try to present ideas and combine all capabilities and efforts to help the Syrian people overcome this crisis. More in the following.
I saw the President. We have spoken about the situation in Syria, that this is a very, very serious and dangerous crisis, and that this crisis is becoming worse by the day, and that it is terribly important and urgent to address it in the proper manner. We will see how we can do that in the coming days and weeks. From here I'm going to do some more visits in the region and then go to New York on the occasion of the General Assembly to meet the Security Council and foreign ministers and representatives of countries that have interest or influence or both concerning Syria. The gap between the parties is very wide, and that's how these things are done. You try and help the parties find the common ground. The common ground does exist. These are Syrians. They love their country. They want peace in their country, and perhaps we can help them achieve that.
The UN envoy to Syria had yesterday met the political counselor at the Chinese embassy in Damascus, Feng Bayao, at the Damascene Damarose Hotel. In a statement to journalists, the Chinese official said that the UN envoy seemed interested in what is taking place in Syria and making his mission a success. He added that there will be other meetings wishing Ibrahimi success in his mission. Al-Ibrahimi also met a number of opposition figures. The Syrian Arab Armed Forces continued its operations to clear Aleppo governorate from the armed terrorist groups, carrying out 2 operations in Masakin Hanano area and near the agricultural nursery there.
News correspondent in Aleppo reported that the Syrian Arab Army forces killed a number of terrorists in a Sikari neighborhood and destroyed 2 cars carrying DShK machine guns. In addition to destroying 15 pickup cars equipped with DShK machine guns and inflicting huge losses upon the mercenaries. A source in Aleppo Governorate said that the army units destroyed 7 cars equipped with DShK machine guns on Aleppo Al-Bab highway. On Ikhtarin Al-Bab highway, the army units destroyed 8 cars equipped with DShK machine guns, killing the terrorists inside them. In another operation, the Syrian army units targeted tens of terrorists near Al-Jawhar Hall and the areas of Al-Rifai Square, Al-Haydariye, Maskana Municipality, Center of Agrarian Reform in Deir Hafir, and Qasr Al-Azam School to the north of Al-Nayrab neighborhood. In Al-Midan neighborhood, the Syrian army broke into a building used by the terrorists to target civilians. They also killed a number of terrorists near Al-Ansari Mosque and the Delivery Hospital, while the terrorists were trying to enter the neighborhood. In a qualitative operation, the Syrian army targeted a gathering of an armed terrorist group near Al-Aruba Club in Bustan al-Basha area, killing scores of terrorists and destroying their cars. The Syrian army also prevented the delivery of any logistic support to the terrorists by destroying tens of cars equipped with DShK machine guns that were trying to enter Aleppo.
And in a related context, in Homs, many terrorists were killed and others wounded in clashes with a unit of the Syrian Arab Army in Bab Houd neighborhood. Another unit of the Syrian armed forces targeted a number of terrorists in Talbise and Arustan, Homs countryside. They were cutting off roads and attacking citizens. A source at Homs province said that our units inflicted heavy losses upon the terrorists. It is to be noted that a unit of the armed forces destroyed last night a car equipped with DShK machine gun and killed all terrorists on board in Tal al-Sadr area in Al-Aqsar countryside. Moreover, the competent authorities and border guards clashed with armed terrorists groups and hindered their attempts to infiltrate the Syrian territories from Halat Azir posts in Tal Kalakh area, inflicting direct losses upon them. The British newspaper The Times revealed that the largest shipment of weapons has arrived in Turkey to be delivered to the armed groups in Syria. More details in the following.
The British newspaper The Times revealed that a largest shipment of weapons has arrived in Turkey to be delivered to the armed groups in Syria. The British newspaper The Times said in an article published on Friday that a Libyan ship carrying the largest consignment of weapons for Syria has docked in Turkey. The article's writer, Shira Frankel, said most of the Libyan ship's cargo is making its way to the armed terrorist groups inside Syria. Quoting a member of the so-called Free Syrian Army, who called himself Abu Muhammad, the article said an over 400-ton cargo included SAM-7 missiles and rocket-propelled grenades, RPGs. The article said the Libyan ship, which is called the Intisar, berthed at the Turkish port of Iskenderun and had been given papers stamped by the port authority by the ship's captain, Omar Mus'ab. The article pointed out that Mus'ab is the Libyan from Benghazi and the head of an organization called the Libyan National Council for Relief and Support, which is delivering supplies to the armed groups in Syria. The article revealed that videos and photos confirmed the arrival of the ship to the Syrian border and that more than 80% of the ship's cargo has been moved into Syria. According to the article, huge amount of Libyan weapons, including RPGs and heavy ammunition, which was seized by the Lebanese authorities in the Lebanese northern territorial waters as it was meant to reach the gunmen in Syria. Meanwhile, a Lebanese party official seized a pickup loaded with various kinds of weapons, including hand bombs, rifles, and highly developed communication devices. The Lebanese authorities also arrested 8 Syrians in Ras Baalbek in Beqa.
Russia stressed that improving the humanitarian situation in Syria radically can only be achieved through finding a political solution to the crisis. In a statement issued on Friday, the Russian Foreign Ministry pointed out that the humanitarian situation in Syria is becoming worse because of the unilateral economic sanctions and restrictions imposed by some countries and regional unions. The statement said that Russia has repeatedly highlighted the futility and invalidity of such practices, stressing that Moscow will continue to exert intensive efforts on all levels to get the violence halted by all parties in Syria and a wide national dialogue launched, adding that Russia shares the feelings and concerns over the humanitarian situation in Syria and the increasing number of victims among the civilian citizens and of the displaced inside and abroad. The statement highlighted the intensive steps made by Russia over the past months with regard to providing humanitarian aid to the Syrian people via the bilateral channels and international organizations. It added that Russia has contributed 2 million Swiss francs to the budget of the International Committee of the Red Cross in aid to Syria. Russia also contributed US dollars, the amount of $4.5 million in the budget of the World Food Programme and $1.5 million to the UN Officer for Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs in the framework of offering aid to Syria, according to the statement. Pope Benedict XVI called for an end to weapons influx to Syria, stressing that the weapons smuggling should be stopped utterly because without weapons this war cannot continue. Earlier, speaking to reporters aboard his plane from Rome to Beirut, the Pope added, instead of sending weapons, which is a grave sin, it's better to send peaceful thoughts and love. The Pope added that as far as the situation in Syria is getting more complicated, so it is more necessary to give them our encouragement, friendship and solidarity. The aim of my visit is to call for dialogue against violence and finding a solution to this issue together and to head with the concept of freedom to the right direction. The Pope criticized the fundamentalism, calling it a falsification of religion, asserting that the Church and all the religions' task is purification. The Pope pointed out, after his arrival to Lebanon, that there are two targets to his visit to Lebanon. First of all, strengthening the ties. Secondly, signing document of the Apostolic Directions Synodal Complex for the Middle East. On the other hand, thousands of Wahhabi extremists protested, rejecting the denunciation of the Pope's visit to Lebanon, raising up Takfiri placards against all other sects, using their way of protest by setting up fire in many places in Tripoli, Lebanon. Clashes erupted with the security forces, which led to the death of one citizen and about 25 wounded, including 18 military personnel. The French journalist Adriana Evangelist has described the Emir of Qatar as the main Mossad and CIA agent in the region, referring that he is the biggest traitor in the world. The writer expressed astonishment at the silence of the world at the shameful acts of the Qatari Sheikh in Libya and Syria, pointing out that he visits Israel periodically to coordinate his moves with the Israeli officials. She added that Al Jazeera channel did not transmit any videos about these recurrent visits to Israel because it refers to transmit false and fabricated information about Syria. The people of Saudi Arabia are revolting, and the revolt is spreading very soon across the country, while human rights organizations turned a deaf ear and a blind eye to Saudi people's legitimate demands. More about that in the following report.
Al-Saud forces opened fire on demonstrations in Al-Qatif region of Eastern Province in the demonstrations held yesterday under the title "The Friday of Demanding for International Investigation." Saudi citizens have held peaceful demonstrations on an almost regular basis in Al-Hijaz, mainly in Al-Qatif, and the town of Al-Awamiyi in Eastern Province, calling for the release of all political prisoners, freedom of expression and the assembly, and an end to the widespread discrimination practiced against Saudi people. However, the demonstrations have turned into protests against Al-Saud regime, especially since November 2011, when Al-Saud forces began to kill protesters in Eastern Province and arrest people randomly. Similar demonstrations have also been held in the capital Riyadh and the holy city of Al-Madinah over the past few weeks.
And with this, we conclude our news bulletin for today. Stay with us. After the break, Khaled Saqabani has the latest in economy news. For more information about Syria and the region, you can visit our website, www.syriaonline.sy. Syrian people. The President added that the success of the political action is linked to putting pressure on the states that offer funding to terrorists, train them, and smuggle weapons into Syria to halt such acts. In turn, al-Ibrahimi affirmed that the basis of his work is the interests of the Syrian people and their aspirations, pointing out that he would work independently and his terms of reference would be Annan's Plan and Geneva Declaration. He added that the agreement of all parties is required to add or amend any point. Al-Ibrahimi stressed the UN envoy to Syria, al-Ibrahimi, and the accompanying delegation. The latest developments in Syria were reviewed during the meeting. President Assad affirmed Syria's complete commitment to cooperate with any honest effort to resolve the crisis on condition that these efforts are neutral and independent. His Excellency clarified that the real problem in Syria lies in confusing the political axis with what's going on the ground, considering that work on the political axis is continuous, especially with regard to Syria's call for conducting a national dialogue based on the wills of all Syrians. President al-Assad affirms Syria's commitment to cooperate with any honest effort to resolve the crisis on condition that these efforts are neutral and independent. Pope Benedict XVI calls for halting sending weapons to Syria. And the Syrian Arab armed forces continue qualitative the necessity of unifying all parties' efforts to find a solution for the crisis due to Syria's strategic importance, its demographic diversity, and the impact of the crisis on the region as a whole. Concluding his statement, al-Ibrahimi affirmed that the solution cannot be realized except through the Syrian people themselves. And in a press conference, al-Ibrahimi stresses that President al-Assad and the Syrian government will support him in carrying out his mission in the best way possible. He added that they will try to present ideas and combine all-cap operations in Aleppo and its countryside, inflicting heavy losses on the mercenary terrorists. Good afternoon, this is news in English from the Syrian Arab television in Damascus. President Bashar al-Assad received this morning